Hey guys, it's a legend. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Real Quarantine Show. You know what? We've got a bit of a bonus for you because not only do we have a brand new episode, we have actually classic episodes. Because before we came to you, we were on another network and we played a bunch of cool shows. Andy, tell the people what you thought of those old shows.
It's all these shows are great. I mean, I always say, our what we do is for the love of the business. We've had great episodes. I've been able to talk with some of the guys from Puerto Rico about Puerto Rico memories. We've talked a lot of history. One of my favorites is talking not once but twice with the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller.
I mean, that's incredible. I would never have thought a year ago, a guy who loves wrestling history, that I would ever have a chance to actually talk and ask questions to the Tennessee stud. That was amazing. Elio, what kind of great memories do you have on this show?
Yeah, there are so many great episodes, and we've had a couple that come to mind. Of course, Continental, the Ron Fuller episodes, both times we had him on, as well as one of my favorites, the Madison Square Garden Glory Days.
Oh, yeah. And we've had some great people. We've had D'Lo Brown, Savio Vega. We've had some really fun guys. We've had some great old veterans. We've had some young up and coming stars. And that's what this show is, you're going to see in the future, is going to be all about that. We're going to encapsulate history. We're going to talk about topics of today. We're going to talk about the things that you guys want to talk about. And these little background, these classic episodes of ours, we'll go back, revisit some of the things we've done in the last year. And off and on, we'll be going forward with a whole bunch of new things. So we look forward to seeing you all. Welcome back to the Real Quarantine.
Yo, listen. This is the Real Canadian Crusher, and you are listening and maybe watching. I'm not quite sure what you're doing right now, but either or, you're listening to the Real Quarantine Show, and keep listening. Don't stop listening. Otherwise, I may have to hurt you.
Hey folks, welcome to another edition of the Real Quarantine Show. I'm your host, the legend T. James Logan. With me, as always, the clean cut, the ever shaven. Well, no, sorry. I guess that's the lone wolf, Andy Anderson. Andy.
Pleasure as always.
And speaking of clean shaven, look at this guy. He's got the face of a little boy. That's Elio, the gentleman canal.
It's great to be here.
Excellent. How you doing, guys? How was your week, Andy?
Good. Just busy being clean shaven and yeah.
You're failing miserably. You're failing miserably at that clean shaven thing.
Take 1 week off of shaving. Look what happens.
Yeah, and look at Elio.
The real question is, you're
going to see Elio, if a half an hour goes by, he hasn't shaved, it's going to be like a full beard because it's ridiculous.
What was that, AJ? What was the real question?
I'm going to say the real question is, does the carpet match the drapes?
Oh, I don't want to know. Please, AJ.
What?
That's
the
wait,
it is almost Halloween, right, Andy?
That'll be scaring some neighbors.
You guys want to see something really scary?
No, we do not. That first voice you heard is our first guest, the Canadian Crusher, AJ Sanchez. AJ, welcome back welcome to our new show.
This is my debut now, I guess, right?
This is your debut. Oh. And coming in to make a run-in if he has to get you out of trouble. We're talking about Javier Ojst. Javier.
Thanks for having me back on, but on again, but for the new show. New show. We're ready to go.
Well, you know
back
what?
On again for the first time.
Yes. Well, folks, you know what? This may be a new show, but if you've listened to the old show, we're still doing the same kind of stuff that you guys like. We're going to try and dive into history, dive into all kinds of topics. Today's a topic-heavy one. It's a topic we talked about on our old show. And what the heck now? Oops. Oh, sorry about that. Technical problems. Did we lose somebody? Yeah, there we go. So what we're going to talk about is, we're going to talk about villains. Now, this is a topic that we've talked about quite a bit. And it's an interesting thing because I don't care what anyone says. Wrestling it hasn't survived this long. It isn't interesting to fans simply because it's two guys in tights grappling for power or moves. It's always come down to some kind of psychological story, something that pulls at you. There's been, and sometimes that story is even translated in what's going on in the ring. So today we're going to talk about something that's a key part of the thing. We've talked about it. Andy has said many times, you need a dragon slayer and you need a dragon. It's not fun if it's just two dragon slayers standing around, let's wrestle a bit. I don't know. But let's talk about villains. And first of all, I want to ask you guys, who here is more of a fan than villains than the faces? Who loves the villains more? Ooh, well, even, yeah, let's face it, right? Why? AJ, why are the villains much more exciting?
That's a good question. I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. So as a fan, before getting into the business, I would have said I enjoyed the counterparts to the villains more so. As somebody in the business now, speaking on that, there's so much more that you can do and be, and you interact obviously with the crowd differently. Whereas the baby faces generally have one character and one mission and initiative and whatnot. So it's just there's more things I think you can do as the villain, and that's probably more entertaining and to me anyway.
Okay. So let's talk about Andy. Yep. Come on, man. Why to you are villains more exciting?
I don't know. Exciting is the right word. For me, it's more entertaining, mm-hmm. and more. I dare say almost more instrumental. And it goes back to what you said about what I've said about, the bigger the dragon, then the better the dragon slayer. And if you just have the two dragon slayers, two baby faces, it can make for an entertaining wrestling match if the right story's told and the right things are done. But pro wrestling, we talk storytelling. That's what it comes down to: good versus evil. And for me personally, I love pushing the buttons. I love trying to figure out what it's going to take to elicit a negative response, a negative reaction from the crowd. There can be some general things, but a lot of times it can be specific. Like what I do in Edmonton might not work if I came to work with AJ in Winnipeg. And maybe we figured some stuff out in Winnipeg, and then maybe we travel to go see Javier and we do some stuff there. And, we got to change, you got to fine tune things, change things up and figure out what works. And to me, it's about, I'll tell people, it's eliciting that emotional response. And one is, especially nowadays, it's because, even we showed here, there's 5 of us and we all said we prefer heels over baby faces. And maybe AJ, maybe you can speak this after too. I think it's easier to be a heel, but at the same time in 2021, granted I haven't wrestled in almost 2 years, but it's actually almost harder to be a heel too, because people will want to cheer you even when you're not a baby face. So if you're going to take the route of being a cool baby face or a cool heel, that sucks because you're making it tougher on the person you're working with. So you have to work harder to figure out how to be hated and have the people booing you. And that's, to me, it's a challenge that I love. Like you've seen our shows, and I think I'm one of the few heels that truly gets heat, and it's something I'm proud of. And it's at the end of the day, it's awesome when you win a match and the crowd either goes silent or they're extremely ticked off. And the other half of that is when you get beat and the crowd is ecstatic. That they're happy that their guys won, but they're also happy the fact that you got beat.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask Andy just one thing. When you say that you really get heat, I've seen matches of yours, but when you worked in Puerto Rico, not anything recent.
Yep.
But when you say you get real heat, is it something you do, or is it your look? And you seem like a pretty calm guy, and I know you do the weights and all that. You probably leave all the all the anger there. But when you leave the curtains and you go to the ring, do you transform into someone else and that's what people don't like? What exactly happens?
To a large degree, yeah. I think it's once you go through that curtain, for me, that switch gets flicked. Um,
You're like time that you're basically saying, okay, time to work. You just
yeah,
kind of turn into your wrestling. You turn the dial up, as they say.
yeah, and one of the best explanations that I've heard, and to kind of paraphrase that I've used, for me, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, was JBL talking about being a heel. And when he was talking about the towel that he had when he was doing that character, it's kind of like, you say I'm a calm guy. I like to think I'm a pretty nice guy, easygoing. And it's like, but you still see jerks and you still see assholes in everyday life. It's like, okay, why is this person a jerk? Why is this person an asshole? Okay, well, it's this quality because they do this, they don't do this. It's all these little things. So to me, it's like everything. Maybe some of it's a bit of a blow off, but it's okay. Well, all these things that are the jerk things, the asshole things,
Yeah.
these are what I want to take. And once I go through that curtain, these are now my tools. So JBL was talking about this guy walking around the gym and with the towel around his neck, and what a jerk or something he was.
He
That's
might
why
be a
started
nice
wearing the
guy, but
towel.
just what he's doing is just like you just want to who is this jerk? He might be a nice guy, but just what he's doing, he's already
Yeah.
getting heat, and he might not even know it.
It's exactly for me. It's like even like one of the early ones, and I mean, guys do it now. Like, and I still do. Like, I'm a gum chewer when I wrestle. And so even like now you watch guys and you can see the kind of, it's usually, especially the heels, the smarmy ones are doing like the big open mouth chew, and it just, to me, like, it just looks aggravating. And that's just, I mean, for me, it's like, I do it because it's like, it helps keep my mouth moist and I just, whatever.
As a fan, let me just
Yeah.
comment one thing on the gum chewing. As a fan, when I see a heel or even a baby face or a cocky baby face, when they're chewing gum, to
Yeah.
me, if you go into that kayfabe mode, it's like they're underestimating their opponent. Like, I'm just out.
That's fair.
I can be chewing gum, and I'm going
And
to beat
still
this
wrestle.
clown. This is, we're going to be out of here in no time. I don't have to throw us out, and he's not respecting his opponent.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Reminds me like a
That's-
Don Morocco eating that sub, that like sub, like the sandwich, kicking that guy's butt. Remember? If everyone's seen that,
I don't know if I see that.
I can honestly say, having seen Andy wrestle many times, it's his ability to act, to be honest, because he has this ability to not to minimalize what he's doing, but to maximize the attitude of it. He comes out and he has the appearance of someone who could probably really hurt you. He looks like a legitimate guy. Sometimes you see some wrestlers, and we talked about a few of them at the beginning of the show that were kind of like, they come out and you're like, yeah, I could put on tights and look like that. Or, Andy looks like a guy where you're like, if you didn't know him and he keeps a very serious face and you don't talk to him, he looks like a guy like, that guy might hit me. And
Or that guy's a bully. That's what I
yeah,
hope for.
and he
I want
does
to be
a
a bully.
bullying stuff. He does a swagger, and he portrays to people that he is a total bully. And one of the things I find very interesting is the evolution of what wrestling is now to its genesis. We started at the turn of the century where it was legitimate fights, and this is where we're going to get into it, because like there is also calls now, were they that legitimate fights, especially near the end, where you'd have two guys who would stand in a thing and they would grapple or fist fight or whatever, and these contests would go for hours. You'd have like hundreds of people crowded around these guys as they stood toe to toe and did these things, and it was a draw, but it had that same thing, that the problem you find with like UFC. Okay, UFC is cool in the fact that it's real, if that's what you really want to see. But the problem becomes is a UFC star cannot compete and fight every single night. Their bodies aren't. Let's face it, we're humans. You stub your toe, it hurts. So imagine a guy punching you in the head, stomach, face, wherever continuously for 10 minutes, and then you're expected to do that the next day. Well, you may be able to do that for a little bit, but when these guys are so highly trained, it's pretty darn hard on the body. And I mean, what's the leeway time? Does anyone know what kind of break, if you're a UFC fighter, you have between fights regularly? Like, it's got to be at least 8-9 months as a minimum. So
I think that's more boxing. I think UFC is maybe less, right?
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
so.
I thought it was quite a bit.
4
It might
months, maybe.
Yeah, I think it depends, like on the individuals, and it's like, because if a guy comes into a fight and knocks out a guy in like 15 seconds in the first round,
Mhm.
chance like he's fresh. Like, why wouldn't he be able to take a fight again in like 3 months or something?
Right.
If they
So-
don't, if no one wants to book him, that might extend his time between fights after
Yeah.
that, right?
So
But there's
I'm
no
gonna dip-
no rule, right? There's no rule where after
Right.
your fight, you gotta wait 5
Well,
months or.
There probably is some sort of rule in some
Uh-huh.
things with UFC. I'm pretty sure they've got something. Who knows? But the thing is, they won't allow that to happen on a nightly basis, right?
No.
And we know professional wrestlers wrestle quite a bit, right? I mean, if you could, AJ, if they allowed you, how many days a year would you wrestle if you could be booked? What would be your minimum if they said, AJ, we'll book you as much as you want all around? How many in 1 year, 356 days, how many bookings are you taking?
I'd probably have to look and see what the pay is first.
We're talking a good pay. No, we're talking a good pay. What's the...
I mean, that's tough to say. I don't know, having not been presented with that, but maybe so. This is a bit of a long answer, but as I've gotten older, when I was younger, it was all about getting to the town, going out that night, getting in the car the next day, going to the next town. Whereas now that I'm older, I like to take in the sights. So if I get the opportunity to travel somewhere, I like to plan a day around so I can enjoy what I'm doing. So, my answer now is probably different than it was years ago. So I probably wouldn't wrestle 7 days a week. I've done it. I've done 38-day tours in a row. So, I could go either way. I guess it would just be circumstance. Where am I?
But let's face it, a majority of people would want the more bookings they could possibly get if they were get well paid and receiving, not grueling travel. You know what I mean? We've talked to Evan Ginsberg. I mean, his film 350 Days is all about wrestlers wrestling 350 days in a year, So why is that possible is because wrestling is a worked art, right? That we know that what's predetermined of what's going to happen. And when Andy punches AJ in the face, he's not really punching him deep hard in the face. I mean, you'd want to. I mean, look at AJ. You'd probably want to smack that look right off his face, but it doesn't happen. And I want to cite back to when we talked with Ron Fuller, and I've heard him talk about the genesis of wrestling. And we go back to this time where guys were doing these fights, and they're fighting for 3 hours straight. And then it would take a break between times. And it would be a great money draw that one time, but then there's a long time between the next one and you get it going. And then Roy Welch got this idea of like, if only there was a way we could do this every night in a new town, like a circus. We move from town to town, putting on the same show. Andy and AJ are going to fight each other in New York, and then they're going to fight each other the next night in New Jersey. And back in the day, there's no internet, so nobody's really saying this, and it isn't big enough that it's not giant newspaper reporting going on here. So basically, they had to come up with an idea to move from show to show, right? How do we do this? And it's sort of like, I guess in a way, like circuses and carnivals, because we've heard people refer to wrestling as carnies or stuff like that. This is kind of the genesis of that, a traveling show. But just like any secret that you need to add more to it. Just because Andy and AJ are going to fight each other in every town along the way, I have to have more than just a reason that there's just these two guys wanting to fight each other every night. So then became the high drama. And the best way to do it, the most effective way, is to have one guy who's the underdog, who's the hero that you kind of believe in, and the one dastardly dude who's done the things to evoke the wrath of our hero. And that is a formula that has sold through wrestling for many, many years. Off the top of your head, Elio, who do you think is the most successful villain? And name the one thing you think that he did that was so villainous that made him that way.
I think one that comes to mind, first name, Roddy Piper.
Okay, so did mine too.
Some of the promos that he would cut, a lot of things he said back then, he wouldn't be able to say today.
Okay. Andy, give me a villain and a horrendous act.
You know, I don't know if it was necessarily a horrendous act, but I'm going to go with Ric Flair.
Mhm.
And just the fact of, you know, staying on top as a champion for so long. But the key ingredient there is that he always cheated to win, or he always had help.
Mhm.
And that was the thing. So you could talk about being the best, and especially back in the day when, you know, times and good versus evil was more simple. It was just this guy saying, "Hey, you know, I'm the best. I beat this guy fair and square, Flair and square," and you know he didn't, and that just riled people. It was just that was it. It's just that he cheated to win, cheated to win. I mean,
Right. All right, Javier.
I would go with the original Sheik out of
Mhm.
Detroit. It just you've spoken about this before, and it really made me think that you were on the money when you said there were a lot of heels, and they would have a reason for what they're doing, a little more like more than just hurt the opponent, more than just exert violence on their opponent. But the Sheik seemed like he was just crazy, and just wanted to hurt his opponent, just like Abdullah the Butcher.
Mhm.
I mean, these guys are the kind of heels that, yes, we have these extreme, these hardcore death matches, and you know, you can argue that they're more violent, or they're more extreme than what the hardcore wrestling used to be. But these matches are super choreographed and planned, meaning the placement of the things are
Mhm.
part of the match. They're there, and the Sheik would just go out there, and Abdullah Butcher would just go out there like a bull, and just go straight at the opponent, and just violence on the opponent, not so many like gimmicks and
Yeah.
and
tricks
props.
and props. That's the word. So I think in a way that's scarier than
Mhm.
the death matches, which 100% respect for the guys who put their bodies through that, but that
Mhm.
is just a total different animal in my opinion. Maybe they came from the stuff that the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher would do, and but it's just a different they're almost like making it not as natural, not like not like a organically occurring violence, you know. So I
Right.
would go with the Sheik.
And it's interesting.
Nice.
You also point up a difference that we're going to touch
And the
on here.
fireball, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Good old flash paper. Anyways, there's also, and there's many reasons why. Just took a look at those two examples you brought up versus, you know, Abdullah the Butcher, the Sheik versus the death match wrestlers today. The death match wrestlers, yeah, they're doing some horrific stuff. They're maybe even doing stuff that's much more painful, much more scarring, much more crazy. But do you notice the feeling and the difference when you go to see? You know, if me and Andy are going to go see a death match, okay, we know we're going to go see Leo and AJ attack each other with set amount of weapons. We're going to see them fight. We're going to be like, whoa, wow, that's crazy, right? But you look back at those days with like Abdullah and the Sheik, where the feeling was like, wow, these guys could spill in the audience and we could get hurt. That Abdullah the Butcher could turn on any of us, and the Sheik may throw a fireball into the crowd. Like, it was a whole different thing, because if you notice with these hardcore wrestlings of today, there are no villains anymore. They're all the tough guy. You know, they're all the guy with, you know, Nick Gage. People cheer him because he's got a pizza cutter and he's cutting open faces. Shouldn't that be a villain? But no, we just take it the fact that if somebody's dumb enough to get in the ring and let his face get pizza cut, well, let's go cheer him on and see who gets the most blood out of each other. You know what I mean? It's a very different look at stuff. AJ, who would you say is a villain that really popped in your mind through history that's just right there?
Probably going to go with Vince McMahon.
Okay.
Not only his story with Bret Hart and all that fun stuff that prompted the Attitude Era, yada yada. But just as the owner of a billion-dollar company, I think there's people that just hate that kind of establishment. So not only in character but out of character is he probably one of the biggest heels. Just to touch on what Andy said too, I thought Flair was a good choice. People paid money in hopes of seeing their regional, their top guy in their region beat the champion. You know what I mean? And that's what the heel's job is you want, the heel's job is to help get that baby face over. So you would pay money in hopes to see that whomever in whatever territory was gonna beat Flair, and everybody was making money back then, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Vince McMahon.
Hey,
That's
plus,
That's a great
how many
choice.
other people
with
has he
AJ throwing
withdrawn?
in a story, let me throw in a quick story to what Javier was saying. The first time, I think it was like 1998, that I went to wrestle in Puerto Rico. I was down there for 3 weeks, and I wrestled for WWC, for Capital Wrestling Promotions. And I was a heel, and at the time Abdullah was there, and he was a babyface. And I know there was one of the towns, we were doing a big schmoz at the end, and I can't remember everybody that was involved, but Abdullah was in the match. And even as a heel going in, and we were doing this big schmoz, I don't. Maybe I'll say I was scared. I didn't want Abdullah to get his hands on me.
You just felt like he could hurt you, even if though he's a face. You just
Yeah.
felt that like
And even though we're all workers and we're working, I still just and I mean, and at that point I'd only been in the year, been in the business a couple of years. So I mean, still really green, but it was just one of those things where just for it's not to say, oh yeah, well, I'm not going to get involved in a death match. I'm going to do some crazy, stupid stuff, whatever. But just you talk about those monsters and that aura that they present. It was still I legit was running that I didn't want Abdul. Thankfully, he can't really run, so I didn't have to run too fast. But I didn't want him touching me.
Fair enough.
Dude, he just had that unique look, right? He just had that. He's got this strange kind of body. He would do this yelping noise. He wouldn't really talk coherently, and he just all of a sudden take out the weapon, and he didn't care about the ref,
the knife or whatever.
I've read stories where the ref says it was a nightmare working with Abdullah, because he would, in a normal match, he would make you look like an idiot, because right in front of my face he's stabbing the guy, and it's like, so what am I here for? Just make it a no rules match or whatever, no holds barred.
Yeah. And I've talked many times about the very one and only time I've seen Abdullah the Butcher wrestle, and not knowing at all what to expect, just listening to the legends and stuff, and I wondered how the match was going to go, and I'd heard the promoter in the back saying to them, okay guys, let's not go too crazy here. Let's, he was very unsure about bringing in Abdullah the Butcher for this one show. And, 30 seconds into the match, he smashes a beer bottle on the thing and starts jabbing his opponent right in the face with the beer bottle. And I'm like, holy shit, it's going to be one of these matches. Okay. So, yeah, he had that thing. Even as an old man, he looked like you just, even though he knew he was old, maybe even slightly frail, he just had an aura to him that if you were to go over there and try and take that beer bottle, you're going to get it in the face.
I'm almost hesitant to say this because it's two totally different kind of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, and I never met Stu Hart, but you always hear the stories about how you don't want to get too close to Stu, because if he gets his hands on you, you're done. And that's almost how it is with Abdullah, where it almost like you don't want him to get his hands on you, because if he does, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, Stu Hart's going to stretch you, and Abdullah's going to pull something out and cut you.
Wow. They are the worst gift wrappers at a mall ever. Now let's take a look here. It's kind of interesting when we talk about, so when I was saying, leading up to this, promoters started to realize that if guys didn't really get hurt, they could continue to do this show constantly. If they could make it look as realistic as possible, they could do this. But there was still the fact of, there were these great turnouts for guys fighting, but they weren't giant, fervent turnouts. So what did they do? Is they threw in the villain, the good guy, the storyline. And villains, man, there are so many great villains that have come and gone. I'm sure there'd be villains, if we could figure out old history and dig it up, we'd find guys we've never even heard of that would probably make us the most, wow, that was the coolest dude ever. We find the villain comes in every form. We've talked about it here, from Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik to these crazy foreign, who knows what they're going to do, to Ric Flair, the guy who spits in the face of decency and fair play, when he has the talent to not have to do it, but he does it anyway to rub it in people's faces. Guys like Roddy Piper who go off crazy and do violence for the sake of violence to prove their point. So many different people. I was trying in my head to think, who would I think is a villain? And you guys are coming up with all these great villains. And of course, me being a soft spot for AWA, my villain choice had to be Nick Bockwinkel, because everyone wanted to see Ric Flair beat the regional champion. That was true. It was different with Bockwinkel. He was such an arrogant prick that anyone wanted him to just get beat once by anybody. You didn't care who it was. And he played the ultimate snobby, athletic jock who's rich, who rubs it in your face how much smarter, because he would. Every interview, he would tell you how much smarter than he was than you. And whatever happened, no matter what they threw at the guy, that shoulders always came up with two. And that was one of the most infuriating things. As much as I grew up to love him, I remember so many times just thinking, please let this be the person who beats him. Let this guy be the guy who beats him. And that, I think, is really key in what wrestling had been and maybe is still these days. Would Ric Flair have worked as much if he wasn't the arrogant guy who cheated? I don't know. Would Nick Bockwinkel be as much of a draw? Because people were paying money to see him get beat. It wasn't always necessary people were paying to see the wrestler beat him. A lot of times it was like, oh, Bockwinkel's in town, maybe tonight he loses. And that's what villains do for us, is they give us something to aspire to beat. Because let's face it, in the fantasy wrestling world here, probably every male puts themselves in that mindset of, oh, that hero is an extension of me in my fantasy. And when he wins, we all win. And when he loses, we're all aggravated because something unfair happened, just like in the real world. So I want to talk right now about villains today. And are there some really effective villains? Because we have, let's look at AEW, who will continually come out and tell you that there are no villains, there are no good guys, bad guys. The WWE, who won't even really say much, but they have their villains, and they're very much different than the villains we see in other places. And I'd like to start off with asking you guys what you think of these people being villains, and are they effective villains, or do they give the feel to you that they're just guys pretending to be villains? And I want to start off with, and I'll throw out, anyone jump in on this, I want to start off with the guy MJF. Here's a guy who comes out and says probably the most horrific things that you've seen anybody say in a top tier thing. I mean, he's a guy, he's not crazy like Roddy Piper, but he says more hurtful things than I think Roddy Piper would say. Is he an effective villain in today's world? Anyone want to jump in?
He's like a throwback, right?
In some ways, yeah. Okay.
Where he's not afraid to get on people's nerves and to hurt people's feelings, kids, women, kids with
disabilities.
like this. Well, wasn't there a kid like in a wheelchair or something like that, or even if it's just a normal kid, that's just you insulting a kid in the crowd. You don't have to go overboard. Just that is a throwback to how things used to be. They would just target either a woman who was a little bigger, or something like that. That's how it now. I sometimes, I don't know. It seems like they're afraid to get heat. I mean, I'm just waiting for someone to make me mad. Please make me mad. But
So would you say MJF's effective as a heel?
In my opinion, yes.
And why?
No.
Why is he effective? Because I think I know why, in my opinion, why he's effective.
Because of these hundreds and hundreds of heel workers, who do not watch the current product, as much as many fans do, I remember him. He stands out for me. You have to stand out,
All right. Andy, is MJF an effective heel in today's world?
Yes, and for me, and I was kind of waiting to see what Javier and AJ were going to say. What I find, the more I watch him, what I find is when people like, oh, he's a great heel, and it was great that Javier said that he's a throwback, and I can agree with that to an extent. In past episodes, when we discussed heels and we discussed heat, and I mean, AEW's come along a lot further since some of these earlier episodes where we had more emphasis on WWE. We talk about WWE being like a publicly traded company, and it's like they have shareholders to answer to. So we talk about guys being afraid to. I don't know that they're afraid to get heat, but it's because of people who they have to answer to, and it's in 2020, 2021, you have to be careful about offending people. You on that level. I think it's extremely challenging to get kind of like when we talk about that heat, we understand what we're talking about. The point where people, you're saying things, you're doing things that are dastardly, that are wrong, that people are genuinely getting ticked off about. At that level, having said that, I think a lot more of what we can do and get away with on the independent level. We can't go too over the top, but I think when done properly, we can do a lot more than WWE definitely can. And I think what MJF is doing, to me, it's like I watch him and I'm like, people talk about his promos, but it's like I've said probably half, 3/4 of the stuff that he said before. I'm sure AJ has said or has heard half, 3/4 of the stuff that has been said before. So to me, it's
thing is, in this day and age, it kind of you see it and you remember. But if this was happening back in the 70s and 80s, it wouldn't be as
yeah, no,
because it would be more normal.
Yes, and because this is you would hear Piper talking like this, you'd hear Morocco talking like this, you'd hear the Iron Sheik talking like this. But what I'm saying is though is that, like it's like with AEW being a lot looser, or maybe what their decision on what I mean, we talk about they swear on a regular basis, which I still think is garbage, but like that kind of like MJF to me isn't doing much different than a lot of heels on the independent level are doing. It's just that he's got that platform, and he's still got talent because he's still got delivered. It's it's not like he's just going out there and going, "Hey, shut up! Hey, shut up!" Like he's delivering the lines. He's definitely got the charisma as a unlikable character. But overall, for what he's doing, to me, isn't that different than what a lot of heels on the independent level is doing. It's just he's one right now
that stands out because since like you mentioned, like in WWE, it seems like there's very little elbow room and space for the worker to work. It's very limited. But with AEW, they're a little bit more flexible, and seems like they're allowing the characters to, even though they say there's no heels and faces, the way they are, you can kind of see who's a heel and who's a face, even if they don't admit it. And someone like MJF stands out as a heel.
What do you think?
Back in the 70s, maybe,
So my thoughts on that is all the guys that were named off when we all named our choices there, they were all real. Everything that they did and said felt real. So I think that goes a long way. And then that draws into your comparison to UFC and whatnot. People bought into the UFC and got really hot because they thought it was real. They bought into what was being sold to them. It's the same thing with wrestling fans when they follow the dirt sheets. They want to know what's going on behind the scenes because that's more entertaining than the show a lot of times because that's real in their minds anyways. As far as MJF being an effective heel, 100% he's effective. I think the problem is a lot of people think wrestling is fake or I won't use the fake, but wrestling's not real until it's real. And I think the problem is now because of social media and things like that, you can get the vocal minority to speak up against something they don't like, and that leads to the next person, and something seems like a bigger deal than it is. Back in the day, you could say things to audience members that, while were clearly offensive and shady and whatnot, you could get away with it without somebody going to social media immediately and trying to cancel you or trying there's so much that goes into it. Another thing as well is the problem is people are smart to the business, and I'll use this as an example. I didn't watch the pay-per-view, but the ending to Bound for Glory was Josh Alexander winning the title and then immediately losing it to a heel Moose, and whatever they chose to do, that's fine. But people's being smart to the business, the fans are coming out and it's heat. They don't like the finish, and that's perfect. That's exactly what they were going for. But with people being smart to the business, they say things like "Oh, I'm never watching again," because they know it's ratings driven, it's money driven. I'm never spending my money here because they don't like the result. Well, no, you're being worked, but they like to think that they're smart to the business. They're going to say these things in hopes of garnering attention on social media or whatever it may be. So I think the difference is, and being an effective heel, what's going to happen to MJF long term, this is my prediction, is he's going to be one of the biggest baby faces eventually, because what happens is this is now wrestling to a lot of people is now a performance art. And what happens is when you go in there as a heel and you do a very good and effective job of getting heat, which is what your job is, people realize that, wow, he's doing a very good job. And they start to cheer these things because they know you're they know you're good. They know you're good at this. So I've had it happen to me, and sometimes I'm guilty, especially when I was younger, of being a little too funny as a heel, which got me cheered. But eventually, people are going to go, man, MJF is really, really good at what he does, and they're going to want to cheer him because he's really good at what he does, and he does it on so little, which is the best part, which is what you hear stories all the time of, less is more, and back in the day. So he will be a huge baby face eventually down the road because his work is so good, and he's believable. You think he's real.
Well, there's also one other factor. I was surprised that nobody brought this up. Is I think one of the things that really makes him an effective heel. I mean, it's great that he has all these mic skills. It's great that he does all these stories, insults, and all this. But he does something too that we don't see a lot in wrestling these days. Nobody wants to be it, but at heart, he's a chicken shit heel. Through all his blustering and all his things, he's the first one to run away, sacrifice a partner, do whatever to get out of trouble. And that makes it even more, by putting that extra block to get at him, it drives fans to even hate him more, because how hard it's going to be for him to ever get his comeuppance, because he has so many disposable people around him, and that's an effective thing, because that's something we've only started to see come back. There's a long time where there wasn't chicken shit heels anymore. There was a time where there were a ton, and then there became a time where everybody was sort of cool. Even the bad guys were sort of cool, and it's kind of refreshing to have that, to have somebody take on that role of I'm a real scumbag. I'm more than willing to run away if, to fight back another day or run away again. So that I do find interesting. Here's what's interesting and I wanted to ask you about this, AJ. Now, you've gone obviously many times into an arena or into wherever wrestling's being held, and I was trying to be nice, bingo hall. You've walked in many times where you've been a heel, and you have to generate some hate by your mannerisms, by your acting, by whatever the things you say and do, right? But I want to contrast that to some of the big villains you see in the WWE, where they're not allowed to interact with the crowd, really. They have to portray their evilness through, I don't know, some kind of different form of acting within the ring itself. You guys know what I'm talking about? You never see really bad guys come out and be like,
But Charlotte does.
Yeah, but I mean, she's an exception. I mean, 99% of guys in WWE
That's why that stood out for me, because she just kind of did like that to the fan, or she really does, because they start booing her, and it's almost like it's a weird dynamic. I'm sorry I interrupted. It's a weird dynamic with her, because she is the heel. I think it's obvious that she's a heel, but she wants praise and not be booed. And I know that might be her character, but to me, it seemed real. Like she's like, you should just realize that I'm better than all of these, and you should cheer me even though I am the heel. And she's like Ric Flair. She's like her dad. She's doing a really good job,
Well,
but,
all you boys and girls who are tuning into this, remember what the lesson here we learn is it doesn't matter how horrible you act. If you crave the attention, you will get it. No, so could you do it, AJ? How would you switch gears like that, where you now have to? Do you think that's a super hard thing to be able now to portray yourself solely in the ring and to your opponent, and to have people watch it from that aspect to pick up that you're a villain? You're no longer yelling at crowds, making any kind of rude comments, jokes. Because, you know, I've seen you fight. You do that a lot when you're the bad guy. You'll come out, say some crude things, get some people going, you know. What if that's taken away? Do you think that's a harder step, having to portray yourself solely as some kind of villain just through your own actions and really with taking the words away from you?
So first and foremost, as a villain, you're supposed to. It's your work that's supposed to get garner your reaction. Anybody can go jump in the ring and say, "Hey, fat boy," and get them to boo you, or any face can look at you and say, "Hey, make some noise and cheer for me and clap your hands." That's easy, and I'm not saying that's wrong by any means.
No.
Whatever works. But if you're comparing WWE to, say, indie wrestling or whatever. And maybe Andy can correct me on this, but as far as I'm aware, with WWE, the mindset is we've already got their ticket money and their merchandise money for those people in the crowd. We're working to the cameras because we're trying to sell pay-per-views and we're trying to sell to the audience at home now. We've already got the money from the audience that's in attendance. We're trying to sell the pay-per-view and whatever to the audience at home. So that's why you see that. You're taught that your work is supposed to garner the reaction that you want. Now, I'm willing to bet if you go to a WWE house show, you're going to see longer matches and you're going to see more of that interaction with the crowd because it's a house show and they're having more fun and whatnot. It's not televised. So TV wrestling compared to WWE house shows and live events are two different things. I think you see more of this independent banter, or the banter in general at house shows than you do on TV because that's what we're trying to sell. We're selling a TV product. For me, you hear it all the time, and when we go to these towns, as much as we do with CWE, we try to tell people who maybe watch wrestling on TV but have never been to a live event or taking in wrestling for the first time that the live experience is going to be much different than what you see on television. You're going to see the interactions, and I mean, that's what I thrive on. And as I get older, I thrive on it more because I don't want to have to take as many bumps. So,
Amen.
Yeah, man. Right. So I can talk and by the time the show's done, I could take less bumps than everybody else. But people are talking about me because I was entertaining and I missed one moonsault. You know what I mean? And that's great. That's what I know for a fact that I go to these towns and return and hear from the guys that are helping push these shows. And, oh man, we remember AJ from the last time because man, he burnt that guy in the crowd or whatever it was. So
nice.
We always sell it to the people that, hey, like a live event is not what you see on television. The interaction with the kids and whatnot. So I think WWE still does it, but if you're comparing television to live events, you're comparing apples to oranges because they're trying to sell to the audience at home, whereas a live event is geared to the people in attendance.
Okay, fair enough.
I think I think that's a great way that you explained it, and that television product. I mean, remember, it's when we talk about the interactions with the with the live shows. When you get that stalling and there's that longer time and the longer matches, remember for TV, it's all about, keeping that audience. We don't want people to change the channel. So when you go into a rest hold and you're going to, chirp off for that, the first, if AJ and I are going to say, okay, we're going to go in the ring and for the first 10 minutes, we're not even going to touch each other because we're just going to chirp with the crowd and chirp back and forth to each other. It's going to be entertaining as hell for the audience. But chances are, 7 out of 10 people are probably going to change the channel if they're watching on TV. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so is it possible? Is wrestling going to survive if, say, we stop doing villains? Will it just lose its popularity? Will it become a hardcore niche thing? In all honest opinions, do we still need the villains in wrestling? And I want to ask Javier first because you've tracked a lot of history through the things. Javier, if people decided, you know what, we don't need villains. Let's just make wrestling, guys doing things for the sake of doing things. Will it survive?
I think wrestling's gonna survive, but
when I say survive, I don't mean the hardcore. Let's stay with it, guys. I'm talking. Will there be any growth? Will there be any kind of upworldly stuff with this?
I mean, to me, I was having my doubts this past year with the pandemic and they had Thunderdome, and are people going to come back and watch wrestling, or let's look at what the product is like right now. Are people really liking what they're seeing? And when these live shows started again, these pay-per-views and all that, they're selling places out. So it seems like the demand is always there. in my opinion as a fan, just me, Javier Ojst, I kind of look at it like many things right now that are on TV do not really draw me in to look. I'm 43. Hour, 2 hours, 3 hour shows. Look, if it's nothing that's really, really interesting, I'm not going to watch the whole thing. I'm just going to watch. I'm going to see who's on it, see if I'm interested in watching someone, and maybe even skip to that. But for me to sit down and watch Raw, for example, they got so many commercials, and I personally don't like I've said this before. The camera goes in and out, and they got these cut shots. This is just me, Javier Ojst. I'm one person, but apparently thousands, I don't know how many millions of fans don't mind, and they're tuning in every week. But me personally, there's a lot of things that I don't like, and that's why I don't tune in. But I'm still a wrestling fan. But but if it gets me interested, in my opinion, there's something they're doing right. But right now, 80%, I don't really care about anymore. Honestly, I don't. I just kind of maybe look at the results, and Andy's mentioned. I see who won, who lost, and maybe where the angle's going. But time, I can't be there for hours and hours watching something like that. Honestly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You know what? Just to clarify, so you hate wrestling total, Javier? Is that what you're telling me?
No. That's not. That's not what I said.
No.
Because we all watch Raw. Brooks.
I think the point is there's a lot of so much content out there, and there is good stuff, but seems like the product is most prevalent, and this is again my opinion, the WWE, SmackDown, Raw. And I haven't even mentioned Next. I think Next, there's a lot of good stuff there.
But they started doing the camera shots on NXT as well.
Oh, they're doing that too?
They started doing that as well.
Like what? Javier likes this shit?
I was trying to watch it.
And the quick cuts, and just keep the camera, I don't know.
I was trying to get into it and
I guess production people who work on those shows will have a different opinion on why they do certain things. But I've seen other shows, and they got good production values, and they don't go to those extremes. But there's a lot of content out there, and there is good wrestling. I can guarantee that. But just the big names that most people know, sometimes, in my opinion, it's just not worth my time.
Well, at the end of the day,
sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say at the end of the day. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're going to watch what you're invested in. And if you're not invested in Raw, I'm not invested. I haven't watched in months. So you're going to watch what you're invested in. I tend to be invested in AEW, and that's just what entertains me. And I'm watching for, probably different reasons, maybe just being in the business and being a worker, but I'm invested. So I watch every week. If you're not invested, whether it's in the show, in characters, you're just not going to watch. You're not going to buy merchandise. You're not going to be. So there's nothing wrong with not being invested.
And this goes back to go back to sports, like I'm a Raiders fan, and I like football in general, and I'll watch the win, lose, or whatever. I'll always watch my Raiders, but there are certain seasons where you're like, oh my God, I just can't take this anymore, but I'm watching, but I'm there. Yeah. But for me to watch another football game where the Raiders aren't playing, that's a little tough for me, again, time-wise,
Right.
Every game's 3.5 hours,
You need to start gambling on football. Trust me, you'll watch it.
It'll make it more interesting.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah.
Now, you know what, AJ, you said something really telling here that I just want to quickly explore before we move on, was you brought up a very good point. The fact is the mentality of you're going to these big events, and the big events really aren't for the people that are there. It's for the television. And that has been a big change from wrestling over the years. I mean, I was thinking about that the other day, where did wrestling go from being, we're taping a cool wrestling show, to now we're actually doing a show that's about wrestling. And that's a very different thing. It is a very different animals here. And so there's that mentality of, we're not really being serviced for the product you're paying for, right? I mean, I pay my $100 to go see wrestling in the WWE. They don't really give a shit that I'm sitting there, to be honest. They're not catering the show to me. They're catering it to the multi-millions.
When it's a TV program.
I'm talking a TV one, not just a house show, but when it's a, and I've been to, I've got to tell you guys, the first time I went to a Raw was probably about 1999. And I was so excited. You know, there's all these big name dudes, all this stuff. I was so excited. I've been to wrestling many times, you know, Stampede. I grew up on that sort of stuff. So I go to Raw, and it was the most tedious, boring bullshit where things stopped, where nothing happened for a long time, where they told us to be quiet for a while, then get ready to cheer for this. And it was like I paid for this. I paid to be ordered around and forced to perform for them. And
that's what they're doing in the Thunderdome, but even worse.
Yeah.
With the fans, I'm not sure if it was here. Someone mentioned that they paid for tickets to the Thunderdome, and they're telling
and he got
okay,
kicked out, I think.
they stand up and
No,
cheer
I
and this
don't
and
think
that.
I don't think he got kicked out. I think he left because he just couldn't do all that.
Yeah, they were asking him to do all these things, and he just was like, "Well, I just want to enjoy wrestling. I don't want to have to be that."
Don't make me cheer. Don't make me boo. I just paid for a seat. You know.
So
I think the thing is WWE is a television show that presents wrestling, and everywhere else is a wrestling show that is trying to present television.
right.
So there's two different things, but and I think this is the difference. So if I'm a big fan of the Connors, so if I decided to go take in a TV taping, or I'm a big Dr. Phil fan, so if I decide to go sit in the audience of Dr. Phil, things aren't changing. I'm seeing what I see on television.
Right.
And I'm seeing it now live in person. So same thing. I mean, obviously you get the extras that you don't see on television when you attend a live TV taping. But to my understanding, even way back, when they were doing studio TV taping, it was a lot of the same. We're taping,
Yeah.
and even then they were taping multiple weeks of television.
Yeah.
So now you're sitting there for 6-7 hours or whatever it might have been. You know what I mean? And we do the same thing with CWE where we're taping 4 episodes at a time in hopes of getting our stuff up. And it's long, it's tedious, but that's part of it. And then WWE would tape main event beforehand or whatever TV show they were taping.
Yeah.
So I think that you're invested in the TV product, and when you attend these events live or the television shows, that's what you're seeing. And then when you go to the live events, you're able to let loose and have a little bit more fun, and it's probably a little bit more interactive.
Okay. Now we're kind of all over the place. We had started talking about villains and stuff and the importance of them, and let's wrap it up with that. Is it important, Andy, in your mind, in today's wrestling? Is the role of the villain still prevalent? Is it needed? Should it be there anymore, or should it be gone?
No, it's always going to be there in some form. And I mean, at the start of the show, you talked about, well, if it was just 2 guys wrestling for the sake of wrestling, you're not going to get that audience. It's that inherent good versus evil, us versus them. Whether it's, we were talking sports, whether it's football, whether it's hockey, there's always going to be, I don't want to say an enemy, but there's always going to be a bad guy. There's always going to be a challenger that you're not going to like, that you want to beat. So I mean, if you're not, it's almost like if you're not with me, you're against me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always going to be there. So even when you don't try to present heels, if AJ's coming in and AJ's just being AJ and I'm coming in, I'm just being me, and you guys are looking, it's like, well, I don't like Andy's beard, so I don't like Andy. Okay, well then all of a sudden, whether I'm a bad guy or you just the guy that you don't want to win, you're going to be cheering against me. So to me, it's there's always got to be, I don't know, I said to me like conflict.
Okay.
Exactly, conflict.
Yeah, and that's because otherwise it just turns into if you don't
meaningful.
Yeah, but meaningful conflict. Because otherwise, if it's just if it's just 2 guys wrestling and there's not really any characters or there's not really any differences or any like conflict,
Yeah.
that you're watching amateur wrestling.
Mm-hmm. We know how
Amateur
well that
wrestling
does.
Well, but that's and I'm not saying that as a disrespect to amateur wrestlers, but I mean for the sake of entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
that's if you say, okay, well let's strip all this away, strip away heels and all that, well that's essentially what you're going to have, and it's and Ring of Honor's they've done like pure wrestling, and sure you'll get the guys and people will love, let's like all these 45-minute wrestling classics, these 1-hour wrestling classics. But overall, like they're not the big draws. If they were, that's what we'd be seeing.
Exactly.
All the time.
Okay.
And the one other thing I wanted to throw in, and I just because I'm looking at the screen, I'm like even my shirt here, we're talking about the heels, and in the past we talk about society, wrestling reflecting society and whatnot. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt that's the antagonist,
From a guy
and
who
here's
Friday the
look,
13th, Jason Voorhees.
we're on the verge. We're on the verge of Halloween.
He murders like 20 people on every movie, and yet
he was the innocent victim. His mother was the killer. Anyways,
well, in the first one, spoiler alert, but like seriously, I mean, you look at Halloween, and it's like, okay, well, people are gonna dress like Jason, they're gonna dress like Michael Myers, they're gonna dress like, any like Chucky, like whoever, like the bad guys.
right.
Long is gone the day where it's like, oh, I'm gonna dress like Bugs Bunny. I'm gonna dress. No, it's like, oh, well, now I want to be bad. I want to be evil, and that's we celebrate. Society celebrates and puts heels on pedestals as much, if not more, than the baby faces.
Okay.
it's almost like they're because they're able to do what most people can't do in real life, whether you're talking about movies or wrestling or books. The villain does things that you're thinking, well, that's not right, but wow, that was amazing. That's I hate that.
Even in the simple way that you say that's like, well, these heels, these characters are doing things that it's like I can't do, that normal people can't do. To me, that's like, well, in a more simpler time, that was the good guy. That was the superhero. Well, Superman could, leap over tall buildings, run faster than a speeding bullet. You want to do that. Now it's, we got such a frustrated, emotional society where it's like people are like, oh man, like this guy could just go on a killing spree. Man, that would just be so awesome. No, it's not awesome like that. Like it maybe for, again, the sake of a movie, but you know what I mean. It's
one of those things where you if you open the newspaper and I see, someone being murdered, that's awful. That's real.
Yes.
If I'm watching Friday the 13th and Halloween, it's awful, and sometimes it's even worse than real life. But you're like, well, wow, that was a movie.
Yes.
But most people can differentiate that, right? That's
yes.
But still,
that's
most
a big
people.
thing too.
So just to be clear, it's not cool to put on a hockey mask and murder a bunch of people.
In the movies, yes.
No,
in real life.
movie.
In real life.
Not in real life.
No.
Damn it! Get that list crossed off, Elio.
Don't get
Okay.
caught.
AJ, my question for you, last one of the night before we do our things. Who is your favorite villain right now in professional wrestling, and why?
Oh, good question. I just wanted to touch a little bit on what Andy was saying there before. Let's look at the biggest babyface of all time. And he was probably, I mean, that can be argued, but Steve Austin, and he did things that he probably shouldn't have. He was essentially a heel, doing the things that people wanted to do. You can't go punch your boss in the face. That's wrong. That's illegal. But they did, Steve Austin was so over because he did the things in a story that was very relatable to people, and did literally the things that people wanted to do every day of their lives. And that's why it got over. They got to live vicariously through Austin, and that's why. Favorite heel present day. Oh man, I got to think. I don't watch WWE a whole lot anymore. So maybe I'll try to pick one from there, one from AEW. But I really dig Roman Reigns. I think what he's doing on TV is probably the only thing in WWE that's really watchable. I don't watch Raw, so I can't speak to that. But and again, it goes back to what I said before. We're like, man, he's doing a really, really good job. So like, do I hate him? No, I think he's being, he's doing great in his role. And, I guess this is coming from me as the performer. So I'm trying to think, like, it's kind of like a double, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a double-edged, two-ended question where it's like, who's your favorite heel? Well, I shouldn't like my favorite. I shouldn't have a favorite heel. I shouldn't like him. So, like, if we're going to talk about who do I dislike, I fucking hate Evil Uno. I think he's the shit. He slaps his leg.
Marco Stunt, but okay.
So is he the biggest heel? I don't know, but I really hate his work. So, but he's a baby.
That's a different kind of heat, right, AJ? One thing is you love to hate, and you appreciate his work, and the other one is where you change the channel. Like, no, I'm not watching this guy, and that's
bad
heat.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
that's bad heat. So like MJF is an easy guy to pick. I mean, I like everything that he's doing. You know what though? I'm loving Dan Lambert's promos on AEW. I think He's getting heat but again, I love his work, so I don't hate him. As a heel, I appreciate what he's doing. So I love what he's doing, and you listen to those promos; they're so quick-witted, and that strikes a chord with me. And everything he's saying, they're letting him take the reins and say all the things that the internet fans that don't like AEW are thinking. So eventually, there's going to be some people that maybe cheer him, or unless all the AEW fans are all diehard and are for that. But so I'll go Dan Lambert, I guess, because I think his promos are great. It's real, and he's saying what other people are really thinking, which makes you want to tune in.
Okay. And Javier, your question for the final here is, I want you to think of a villain in history who you think would be a perfect fit if you could pull him through time and throw him into today's wrestling wars, who his villainous ways would be the hated one where people would tune in to boo him and to just, make him the villain he is. Is there a guy that you think would be a perfect fit? And I would love you to go somebody 80s or back.
I would have loved to have answered can you guys hear me? Is the sound bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good.
I would have preferred answering the question you threw out to AJ, because bringing someone from the past and for it to work now, that's where you go back to like the MJF kind of person, where yes, he's a throwback, but not everything feels real, and that's a term we've been throwing around a lot. But I think that's the whole key of a heel that works, where isn't even now in 2021, isn't wrestler's job isn't still his job for you to doubt, for you to say, well, I'm not, I know this is supposedly a work and they're working together, but that felt pretty legit. Once they do that, that's the key for either a baby face or a heel or whatever they're trying to get across. As a fan who rarely watches Raw or SmackDown unless it's there and no one can change the channel, to me, Charlotte Flair is doing superb work, because she is really getting on the fans' nerves, and I think there are a lot of fans who generally don't like her, and they'll just pick on something, they'll just choose something on either, oh look, she's changing her face, oh look, she's all skinny now, she's looking like a dude, or she's she's doing what she's supposed to be doing, and I really appreciate that in 2021. And for someone who doesn't tune into Raw, if she's gonna have a match, I'll check it out. I think it's totally worth it.
Okay. So
but I would like to go back to that question. If anyone has bring back a heel who will
I've got somebody for you.
Yeah, go for it, man. Go for it.
I've got somebody for you, and I'll preface this saying a little bit. It's like, for what he did, I think, he'd probably be maybe a cool heel, but I think for the way that he worked and his style, if he came over and still was able to work in 2021, I think he could still be a legit heel, would be Ravishing Rick Rude.
Interesting pick.
Because he was one of the guys too that for me, it's like he, and AJ talked about it, like so many heels, they become so good, they become faces.
He was never
Rude,
cheered, I think, right?
Rude is
really
like
not
always
really
a heel.
No. Yeah,
at least it is. For all his WWF, WWE, NWA, WCW day, he was always a heel, and he was a jerk. And I think he'd be one of the
women cheered him.
ones.
The women did cheer him.
Yeah, okay, but
in a way,
yeah.
because they couldn't.
There's something where guys
had power over them, or something.
Yes, but even how guys, we get a kick out, like, oh, that's awesome. He's got it's like he's got Jake Roberts' wife on the type thing. Yeah. But I mean, as far as heels, I could, we talk about the believability and whatnot. For him to come across and be an ass and be so full of himself and everything, I think Rick Rude would kill it in 2021.
Fair enough.
How about someone like King Kong Bundy? He did a lot of good work. He was. Yeah. I don't think he ever got cheered, even if he wasn't doing anything. People would just boo him because look at him. He's a big guy, big bald guy, and he's yelling, right? More of a basic formula, but no one ever cheered him, right?
I think it would be interesting if I could pull through time. I would have pulled Stan Hansen.
I was thinking about Stan Hansen, but I don't see him as someone. He caused a lot of chaos in Japan, but
Well, and a lot of AWA stuff. I mean, you know, he broke Martel
Yeah.
and took his belt and all that junk. But I just worry they would turn him into Lance Archer, just a really big, goofy bad guy who gets beat.
I don't see Stan Hansen doing a moonsault
Oh, yeah, I don't see that at all.
and landing on his head.
So before we wrap things up, I'd like to ask AJ, do you have any social media stuff you want to throw out there? Anything you want to promote this week on the show?
Man, right now, just I'm on the old Twitter machine at Crusher AJ, all one word, and prowrestlingtees.com/Canadian Crusher. That's all I got right now. So yeah.
How come you don't have plush dolls? I see Mentalo selling. Why don't I have an AJ Crusher doll?
See, me and Danny have tried to needle him a little bit, but he's very secretive about where he gets his work done because he doesn't want other plush dolls appearing at the merchandise stands. So I've lucked out, and I've got a girl that does some really good design work. So I'm working on some shot glasses and some other fun stuff. So we'll see what happens.
And only because you're my friend, I won't throw in a mean joke about not being able to afford to put that much stuffing into a doll. All right, Javier. Javier, you got anything you want to promote?
I just, I write for Pro Wrestling Stories. If you want to check out any of my work, it's on prowrestlingstories.com. I can send you, if anyone is interested in just my work, I can send you a link of all my stuff. I just submitted my 101st article a couple of days ago. It hasn't, not all 101 articles have been published yet, but 101 have been submitted. So, and again, I thought I was just going to write one article and be done with it, but I guess writing about wrestling is worse than crack or something. So I've done 101
I don't know
of
that's
those.
worse than crack. Doesn't seem like you're you
still seem to own things.
okay.
Well, I guess just the addictive factor where you write it and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, that might be a cool thing to write about. But prowrestlingstories.com or friend me on Facebook and we're cool, man. Appreciate you guys having me on.
You know, you are a hero to me and Andy, and I don't know about Elio if he's on this train quite yet, but you're a hero to me and Andy because you constantly hunt down pictures for us of Sheik Casey.
Yeah, when I see one, I'm like, I know who I'm going to send this to.
And me and Andy revel in them. We enjoy it. And Andy sends me pictures of Nick Bockwinkel all the time, so I'm just getting two of my favorite dudes. These old cool pictures I've never seen before. But you know what, guys? I want to thank you for coming on this week. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. The Real Quarantine Show will be rolling forward. We talked today about heels, the villains, the guys who make it tough for guys. We branched off on a lot of interesting topics, but that's the point. That's the point of the show. This isn't school. We aren't grading ourselves, but we're talking some good wrestling. And I want to appreciate the fact you guys brought in some really interesting and contrasting views about a lot of different things. And I think a lot of people who listen today may look at things in a new way too, because we had some really interesting points here. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Andy, Elio, thanks again, guys. It's always good. Folks, we'll see you down the road. Also, keep your eyes out for the Real Quarantine Show archives, where we'll be pulling back some of our big name guests, some episodes we've done in the past. You'll see those posted up. Revisit some of the bigger names of wrestling that we've had on here. We've had up-and-comers, we've had new guys, old guys, we've had big guys and small guys. We've had them all. And we want to the thing is, every one of them had a great voice and a great opinion. And we've all the shows we've done together, me and Andy and Elio still enjoy this every week. The fact to get to sit and talk with these people about wrestling. And fans, you want to talk about wrestling, please feel free to write in, ask us any questions. Ask us for maybe guests you want to see. I mean, it's not like we got any pull and we can get anybody, but hey, we'll give it a shot, right? And guys, thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you guys next week on The Real Quarantine Show. Good night. Oh, wait, no, stop it. I'm not even going to do that. We're going to do the Stampede Wrestling ending.
Thank
and I want
you.
Andy to
I'm
throw it
like,
out
wait
there.
a minute, what's going on?
Yeah, we're not getting all greedy. Andy, end us
All
with a
right.
good Stampede Wrestling ending.
In the meantime, and in between time, that's it. Another edition of The Real Quarantine Show. Bye-bye now.